Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Marcia Gordon, and I'm President and CEO of the Business Council of Westchester. And today, it's my distinct honor to welcome everyone to a brand new series that the Business Council of Westchester is implementing called The State of Westchester's Economy, Post-Pandemic and Future Focused. We are focusing on the future of Westchester's post-COVID-19 economic recovery because we are all ready to start looking ahead. And in this new conference series, we are assembling top leaders, not only from the region's private and public industry sector, but indeed nationally today as well. The State of Westchester's Economy is a four-part virtual series that will examine current economic conditions, what it will look like post-COVID in terms of both challenges and opportunities that can drive Westchester's economic engine into the future. We have 4 different events that will focus on separate topics. Today's is infrastructure, healthcare on March 10th, education on April 7th, and hospitality and retail on May 5th. We hope that these will be not only informative and inspiring and educational, but enjoyable as well. We especially want to welcome and thank our presenting sponsor for the entire series, PCSB Bank. And it's my distinct pleasure to welcome Joe Roberto, the CEO and chairman of the board. So Joe, welcome.
Thank you, Marcia. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be with you this morning and to sponsor this timely and important event. I want to thank Marcia, John, and the rest of the Business Council staff, plus our expert panelists for collaborating on the first of a 4-event series addressing the state of Westchester's economy. Today's segment will focus on infrastructure. The development and modernization of infrastructure could very well be the key to new job creation in the post-pandemic world, especially in Westchester County and the Lower Hudson Valley. Fortunately for us, we have the Business Council of Westchester, the county's largest business membership organization, as advocates for promoting economic development. And for those of you who are watching but are not Business Council members, please consider joining. It will be one of the best investments you can make in 2021. I am very proud that PCSB Bank has benefited by being a longtime member. PCSB Bank was chartered in 1871 as a true community bank, serving local families, businesses, and communities throughout Westchester and the Lower Hudson Valley. We've evolved and expanded over time, but we always remain true to our roots as a community bank. Our new tagline, the incredibly neighborly commercial bank, continues that theme. Despite the challenges we've all faced with the pandemic, we work closely with our local business customers to meet the challenges they faced through loan deferral requests and obtaining valuable needed funds through the SBA's PPP process. It was rewarding to hear our customers say that they were reassured to know that PCSB Bank was by their side every step of the way. Many non-customers contacted us once they learned we were fully engaged in helping small businesses through these tough times. And I'm very proud that many have become new customers. It confirms that our new tagline has true meaning and is evident in the way we conduct business. When I think about today's topic of infrastructure, I feel good that we as a bank are fully engaged with municipalities and schools throughout our government banking division. In addition to providing assistance to developers who need construction and permanent financing as we work towards recovery, we want everyone to know that PCSB is here to help. I want to thank Marcia and John and the whole Business Council team again for allowing PCSB Bank to sponsor this worthwhile program. We encourage you to participate in the 3 upcoming sessions that will run through May, covering healthcare, education, and hospitality and retail. And remember, if you're not a member of the Business Council, there is no better time than to join now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe, and thank you for all the great work PCSB Bank has done for the community, for your customers, and for the entire business community. You know, many of us have found out that this is the most important time to have excellence in close banking relationships, and PCSB has been there steadfastly for the community throughout. I'd also like to recognize and thank our two other sponsors today, Harrison Edwards. Harrison Edwards is one of the leading PR and digital marketing agencies based in Westchester County, helping clients scale and grow across a multitude of sectors like healthcare, government, nonprofits, real estate, and economic development. The team has won over 150 awards for excellence. Many in Westchester may not be aware, but you will be after today, after hearing Bob Knight, that Harrison Edwards is also the national leader in the fiber broadband industry, representing broadband clients and projects in 14 states, plus Australia and Canada. They are active members of the Business Council, and thank you again for viewing the BCW as one of Westchester's most important assets. Thank you, Carolyn and Bob and Harrison Edwards. Robert Morton Company is our other sponsor, and we're so pleased because Robert Morton Company, to many of us, has defined interest and leadership in infrastructure development for so many years. From Robert Morton Company's perspective, a true economic recovery begins when you have two things in place. First, you need clear, competent, and engaged leadership. And thank you for recognizing both John and myself and the BCW board, led by Heidi Davidson of Galvanize Worldwide. And second, you need significant reinvestment in and expansion of critical infrastructure, roads, water, sewer, energy, digital, et cetera, because these are the primary underpinnings for sustainable future growth and ensure equitable economic opportunities for the entire community. They are proud to sponsor today's discussion regarding infrastructure, tackling Westchester County's challenging road to a post-COVID-19 recovery. To Tim Jones and the entire Robert Morton Company team, thank you so very much. And with that, it is my distinct honor and privilege to turn this over to my colleague and partner, John Ravitz, our Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer. John?
Thank you, Marcia. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being with us today for the first of what should be four very important and exciting projects. As the county's largest business membership organization that focuses on economic development and advocacy, infrastructure and infrastructure funding and infrastructure long-term strategies has always been one of our top priorities. You know, when you think about it, infrastructure is one word, but it means so many different things and have so many different relationship building pieces that in Westchester County, we have seen really help our economic development as well as continue to create jobs and bring in revenue. We're facing huge issues and huge problems due to this pandemic. We have a state deficit of $15 billion. We have a lot of work that needs to get done. And now the question is, how do we do it during these tough times? And so what we've done today is put together a panel of experts, people who are living and breathing this every day, who are leading organizations to help move New York State forward, who are on the ground in Westchester County on a daily basis. And we want to be able to not only just talk about infrastructure in terms of roads and bridges and tunnels, but also the infrastructure of a broadband and what that means to Westchester County, New York State, and the country. So our panel today consists of four really top level folks, and I want to thank them for being here. John Cooney, who's the Executive Director of the Construction Industry Council of Westchester and the Hudson Valley. Michael Emlendorff, who's the President and CEO of Associated General Contractors of New York State. Hugh Grecian, who's the Westchester County Commissioner of the Department of Public Works and Transportation. Bob Knight from Harrison Edwards, and also is the co-chair of the Public Officials Committee Fiber Broadband Association, and Ed Mortimer, who's the Vice President for Transportation and Infrastructure Policy for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I'm going to kick it off with Ed. And let me just give our listeners just a little more background on Ed. Ed serves as the Vice President of Transportation and Infrastructure at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. He oversees the development and implementation of the Chamber's transportation infrastructure policy and represents the Chamber on Capitol Hill, as well as before the administration and industry organizations. He also leads the Americans for Transportation Mobility Coalition, a collaborative effort by business, labor, transportation stakeholders, and concerned citizens to advocate for improved and increased federal investment in the nation's aging and overburdened transportation system. Ed, thank you for being here today. You know, obviously we have a new administration coming in to the White House, as well as new leadership in the United States Senate. If you could just give us maybe a helicopter tour of what the Chamber is seeing on a national level on the issue of infrastructure.
Great, John. Thank you very much for the introduction. And I appreciate Marcia and yourself and the Business Council of Westchester for all their efforts on infrastructure and business issues in general. As you all know, this has been an issue that your chamber and your members have been involved in for a long time. We look at infrastructure as kind of the circulatory system of economic growth and opportunity in this country. And we have been advocating for a modernization of our infrastructure. A lot of it was built 50 to 100 years ago. And I know Bob's going to get into broadband, but we have a wonderful modernization that it's been on the drawing board for a while, but we got to get it done. We've been talking about this for a long time. And so we got to get beyond talking about it, sending out press releases, having hearings, and get a federal blueprint enacted into law this year. Because if we can get action at the federal level, New York State is ready to follow suit. I know your community will follow suit, and I look forward to hearing the other community leaders on this panel. But we have to have a federal blueprint. Dwight Eisenhower developed the interstate highway system. We wouldn't have a national interstate highway system without federal leadership. Teddy Roosevelt, the inland waterways. So the federal role in providing that blueprint to make sure that businesses in Westchester County can not just move their goods and services into the city, but also all over the country. We're in a global economy. And so it is critical that we have this blueprint and this long-term opportunity. We view that this is where, I like to use a football analogy, we're in the red zone. We've been pushing this down the field, and you all have been a key part of making sure your congressional delegation understands this. We have some projects around the country, and you're just looking at your region, you got the Tappan Zee done, but the Gateway Project and so many others that with federal support, we can get them done and stop talking about them. So we do view an opportunity here with a new president, a new Congress. We're going to see three opportunities to address infrastructure. Well, first is going to be the COVID relief. A lot of transportation agencies have obviously lost revenue or struggled because of the pandemic. And so I think you're going to see relief for public transit, airports, to get them through. And then as we move into the recovery phase, we're going to see a stimulus package, which will pretty much inject some new investment into the current transportation programs, which will help communities in the short term. And then finally, Congress is going to follow up with a longer term vision for surface transportation. It's not going to be easy. We've been working on this a long time. Paying for it is always a challenge, and I look forward to having a further conversation about that. But our view is the cost of inaction actually costs businesses more than the cost of action. So delay is really not an option. We at the Chamber have engaged a new effort called Build by July 4th, which is building upon our previous infrastructure efforts. We've reached out to the environmental community, the clean energy community. John, in your introduction, you mentioned we see this more than just transportation. We see this as water, energy, rural broadband, and I know Bob's going to get more specific about that, but public-private partnerships to make sure every citizen has broadband access. You're not going to have a job in the 21st century without that broadband access. So really, we think there's an opportunity here to get it done. It's not going to be easy. We need to get some bipartisan support. So we urge you all to contact your members of Congress, let them know the issues and projects in your region, let them know we need national action. And just saying you can't get it done, that's not a good response. So hold their feet to the fire. We look forward to partnering with you all in this critical effort. And we think we have the best opportunity we've had in the last 15 years to get something substantial done at the federal level. So appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all today, and I look forward to the questions as we move on. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ed. And for those of you who are joining us today, if you do have a question for the panel, please put it into the chat room. We will try to dedicate the last 10 minutes to questions and get to as many as possible. Our next speaker is someone who is on the front grounds in New York State, and that's Michael Emlendorff, who is the president and CEO of the Associated General Contractors of New York State, AGC-NYS, which is New York's leading statewide construction industry organization. Prior to joining AGC in 2011, Mike served as the New York State Director of the National Federation of Independent Business, NFIB, for 5 years, and he was a member of Governor George Pataki's senior staff, serving in all 3 of the governor's terms. Mike, thanks for being here today. As Ed said, obviously, there is a sense of urgency, but there are still a lot of challenges. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you and your members have had to go through in this pandemic? And then as you see, looking into 2021, what are some of the priorities that you're focusing on?
Sure. Thank you, John and Marcia, and really our thanks to the Business Council of Westchester for your partnership on these issues. We work closely together with the Business Council on infrastructure investment and any number of broader economic issues that impact the health of the economy and as such the health of our industry. You know, clearly, I think there's pretty broad consensus that infrastructure investment is one of the key ways to drive economic recovery. I think there's bipartisan agreement on that front. Certainly in New York, Governor Cuomo has that vision. In Washington, President Biden has that vision. You know, Ed, I appreciated your comments. We've been doing virtual town hall meetings since we all got locked in our homes last March with the congressional delegation, and to a member, from the most conservative member of the New York congressional delegation to the most liberal, there is broad bipartisan support for infrastructure investment. Talk a little bit more about that in a second. So I'm going to share some slides to your point, John, to kind of give a sense of where the industry is and sort of frame where we need to go in terms of recovery. So needless to say, this has been a tough year for the construction industry in the United States, and it's been even worse for the construction industry in New York. We were impacted earlier and more significantly, particularly early on, by the COVID pandemic than other states. And you can see that here. I mean, that is a precipitous drop in construction employment. And that is despite the fact that in New York, we largely were able to keep working. We did a good job advocating to keep construction essential. Many projects kept going more or less uninterrupted. There were certainly impacts, and others we were able to relatively quickly get back online. You know, kind of looking to see how New York did nationally on construction employment, not good. We led the nation in job losses. We also led the nation in recovering jobs at the very end of the year, but you know, we are still not back to where we were before the pandemic, and that is obviously a source of concern. Looking at it by metro area, you know, some interesting figures here. One of the things that's challenging about these numbers is they don't break out residential construction from non-residential construction, which is kind of what we talk about when we talk about infrastructure. So, for example, you look in your neighborhood at the Dutchess Putnam numbers. You've got pretty strong growth there. We think that's driven by residential as people have moved around in New York and frankly moved out of the city. Post-pandemic, there's been a very high demand for residential construction. And I can share a link to these slides, John, if anyone wants to look at them in more detail after I'm kind of moving through them so we save time here. But this takes a look at what's happened in metro regions in terms of construction employment. Unfortunately, you see a lot of red across New York, which is not good. You know, here's a look at some of the numbers by metro. If you look at Orange, Rockland, Westchester, which obviously is of interest to folks here, you know, year over year had an 8% loss in construction employment, which is not the worst, but obviously not where you want to be. So what's next here on this score? Obviously, at this point, those of us who are busy with all things Albany and New York State government, again, we've got a strong partnership with John and the team at the Business Council of Westchester. We're focused on the executive budget. There's some good news in the executive budget. The governor's talking about a $306 billion infrastructure plan. Big number. What's in that plan? Not clear. You know, it's a lot of stuff that's been talked about before, some new things, which are certainly good news. Overall, we continue to have strong overall investment in the New York State DOT capital program. The governor proposed this year what would be the second year of the 2-year plan he proposed last year, which represented a pretty significant increase in funding. Last year, given the uncertainty with the pandemic and also what's going on in Washington, again, to Ed's point, this is a partnership between state and federal government. Without action in Washington, it's very hard for the states to plan and invest. The legislature approved a 1-year program. So basically this year, the governor has proposed the second year. While the overall funding level is good, if you back out the $1.3 billion that he's investing in sort of the big signature projects that everybody gets excited about, the core DOT program, which is the investment in really the nuts and bolts of our transportation infrastructure, roads, bridges around the state, on the state system and the local system, which I know is important to you and a lot of the folks listening, is actually the lowest it's been in 5 or 6 years. That's a problem. And you can't just invest in mega projects at the expense of the core program, because mega projects are a lot less exciting when the stuff in between is falling apart, right? So that's something that we're going to be looking to improve upon, and also try to bring home some more resources for local governments to invest in their infrastructure. A lot of green investment, a lot of infrastructure investment on the environmental front, which is good. But there's PLAs, prevailing wage requirements, and MWBE goals attached, which are going to make realizing those things more challenging. Some interesting things on the affordable housing front in the executive budget, including an initiative to convert vacant commercial space to affordable housing, which could create some opportunities. And overall, the capital program that the governor's advanced is strong. SUNY's capital ask has basically been fully met, which is an improvement over what we've seen. Because again, infrastructure is broad term. It's not just roads and bridges, it's environmental and social infrastructure as well. So we think there's some things to be hopeful about on the state level. But there's a lot of things to be concerned about. We are way behind the 8 ball on infrastructure investment, and it bears a significant cost on New Yorkers and on the economy. Statewide, New Yorkers pay about $26 billion a year in increased costs from vehicle repairs, being stuck in traffic, wasted fuel, and things like that because of the poor state of our infrastructure. You can see this sort of broken down regionally here. This is from an organization called TRIP, which is a transportation research organization that does work nationally. So how about Washington? This is a state federal initiative. I think there are some things to be encouraged about, particularly if you are a New Yorker. President Biden is obviously someone who believes strongly in infrastructure. He and the governor have the same slogan, Build Back Better. I'm not sure who had it first. They may end up in a court dispute at some point about that. Hope not. But they both believe in infrastructure investment. I agree with Ed. I think it will get done. After 4 years of infrastructure weeks that ended with punchlines and not legislation, I think that we will actually see something happen. And thanks to the guy on the right side of the screen, I think whatever happens is going to be very good for New York. Chuck Schumer is a guy who's got the strong record of bringing home the bacon for New York. He is a fighter for New York. He takes a statewide view. He's around the state every year. He goes to all 62 counties. And I think, clearly whatever they do on stimulus and infrastructure will be very favorable for New York. And like Ed, we're watching that very closely, and we're going to continue to have conversations with the congressional delegation because, again, I think this is really a singular opportunity to get something done. I think it's an opportunity to get something done in a bipartisan fashion. Wouldn't that be nice? There is broad bipartisan support for this. I kind of chuckled when I watched Secretary Buttigieg's, that's a tough one, confirmation hearing. Senator Thune from South Dakota said there is historically broad bipartisan support in the Senate for infrastructure investment and broad bipartisan support for not paying for it. That's one of the challenges. And that I appreciate the chamber's willingness to step forward with revenue ideas to pay for it because everybody likes infrastructure, but we've got to come up with long-term strategies to pay for it. Both in the near term and then in the long term, as we look at things like the gas tax not really working anymore, right? As we see a transition to electric or alternative fuel vehicles. So, I think there's a fair amount to be optimistic about. I think there is a lot of work to be done, and we're ready to work with our local partners and our federal partners to try to make that happen and try to rebuild our economy. So thank you, John.
Mike, thank you. And again, it's been a great partnership working with you and your organization on a whole host of issues. And that partnership will continue through the 2021 and beyond. We do want to talk about different parts of infrastructure. And obviously, the issue of broadband is one that over the last year, I think now people who weren't focusing on it now certainly have no choice but to focus on it. There was an interesting, before I introduce Bob Knight, I read a chilling report just yesterday from a new report that the state education department just put out, where they said that more than 215,000 students in New York State do not have access to learning devices where they live. And the agency that did the survey said that between from October to January, more than 165,700 students, again, lack the steady access to internet from their home or place of residence. And again, that's a frightening number, especially when we know that the majority of the students in New York State and around the country have not been in their classroom. So it was important to have someone who really, again, is a leader around the country on broadband issues with us today, and that's Bob Knight. Let me just briefly tell you a little bit about more before I turn the program over to him. As we've mentioned, he's a partner at Harrison Edwards PR and Marketing in Armonk, and he's widely considered the nation's leading expert in stakeholder engagement for broadband projects. He's the co-chair of the Public Officials Committee of the Fiber Broadband Association in Washington, D.C., and he was just named a chair of the Broadband Community Summit this September in Houston. In the public sector, Bob serves as a Commissioner of Economic and Community Development for the town of Ridgefield, and he sits on the state of Connecticut's Region 5 Long-Term Recovery Committee for Business and Jobs. Bob, thanks for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Marcia, and thanks to everyone for joining us here today. So I have a little presentation. Hello. So I think the first question we always get asked here in Westchester is, why did we get involved in this industry? And if you look across the sectors that we typically work in, fiber broadband really ties all of our work together. And it's a highly political issue. It's a highly technical issue. And so we're very involved in the process, sort of from start to finish, to driving customers. We're involved in 18 projects across 14 states. Now, broadband projects are popping up like crazy all over the country, except for one little area, if anyone wants to take a guess. That's the Acela corridor. That's where we're in, between Boston and Washington, D.C. So for years, we've actually had very good broadband service here in the Northeast. You know, it's the seat of power, it's the seat of finance for the nation. But now we're coming to the realization that the rest of the country has come to, which is that our networks are really at capacity. And it's not sufficient. It really can't take us into the future in a data-driven economy. So the rest of the country is actually moving pretty quickly, especially out west and in the upper Midwest, moving to get to broadband. So I want to overlay the national broadband maps from the FCC over where some of the projects are. The lighter areas are where there's fewer providers, darker areas where there's more providers. In our region, there are more providers, a densely populated area. Deeper pockets typically in this region, and so you'll see private business going to this area. There's a problem though when we're looking at the national broadband maps, and this is going to impact the entire conversation that Ed was talking about a lot earlier, which is that the FCC maps are flawed. They say that more than 90% of the country is covered, but we know that the figure that John just gave, 30% of students in the US have no broadband access for 30%. So that 90% number doesn't equate. Why is that? It's because the data is self-reported by the internet service providers. So it's based on census block data. So if you have two addresses in a census block where people are taking broadband service or have access to that service, the entire block is considered served. So potentially hundreds of people would be unserved, but if the block is considered served, it means that there's no access to funding, no access to resources. So the good news is that Congress has just allocated $65 million for the FCC to once and for all fix the broadband maps. We'll see how that goes. Just a bird's eye view of New York State. There are more providers sort of in the Finger Lakes region and around Albany. You tend to see that around state capitals. And around the Finger Lakes region, you have a few tier 1 carriers, but you also have a few tier 2 carriers. And so that's why it's a little bit darker. You look at Westchester, and we have pretty good broadband coverage. Northeast part of the county, it looks like North Salem and Lewisboro, less population density, fewer fewer providers. Makes sense, right? So broadband is critical infrastructure today. And this was a point Ed was making earlier. Think about the blacksmith and what it meant to get electricity and how the blacksmith could scale his business. You look at what interstate highways did for the labor markets, moving goods and services and airports and the global marketplace. We are in a data-driven economy now. And the internet drives innovation. It opens up new markets. So having access to high-speed broadband, it is the critical infrastructure of today. Delivering broadband, there's a whole lot of confusion in the marketplace. What is broadband? Broadband is actually, think of it as a speed rating, oversimplifying things. And so on the lower end of the speed rating is satellite delivered broadband. I don't care what Elon Musk says. Satellite, copper wire, that's like, internet from the phone company. Then you have your coax, which is your cable. On the fastest side is fiber. And we have a lot of fiber in this country, but we don't have last mile fiber. So we have we have the long haul, kind of like your highways, and you have the middle mile networks, which are like your main roads, but we don't have that last mile connectivity that we talk a lot about when we talk about transportation. 5G, we get a lot of questions about 5G. So 5G is a really exciting technology that's coming out, but 5G needs to hook into fiber in order to move the tremendous amount of data that's generated. So if you don't have fiber connectivity, you don't really have the full capacity of 5G. Basically, the 5G that's out there right now, for the most part, unless it's hooked up to fiber, is basically nothing more than an enhanced 4G, which is what we're used to. So we have a new administration, and there's a new way of thinking about infrastructure, and there's a whole lot of funding out there, but there's strings attached to all the funding, as you can imagine, because it's Washington, right? So Biden has, or Cuomo, whoever, has their Build Back Better program, right? $20 billion, that's $2 billion a year over 10 years for broadband deployment. I want to make note of this $3.2 billion EBB, that's the Emergency Broadband Benefit. And that was to provide pandemic-driven broadband. I think it was part of the CARES Act, to those who were unserved and didn't have broadband. There's a couple of things that are really systemically wrong with this this program. Number one, it really steers the monies on a voluntary basis towards tier 1 carriers. It sort of doesn't really help tier 2 carriers. But the E-rate funding, which is the education rate funding, isn't permissible for remote learning. So only Washington could they create legislation where you're looking to address pandemic-related learning, but you can't use it for remote learning. The good news is a forthcoming bill that they're working on right now is going to be able to fund remote learning. And I think the Clyburn bill, $80 billion for infrastructure, $9 billion for broadband, that has the least amount of strings attached. And I think it's probably going to be our best bet. So let's look at New York State. This is going to be really, really interesting, and this is going to impact everyone who's on the Zoom today, whether you're at home or your business. And I think New York State is actually doing something really interesting in this area. New York State now, as part of this Rebuild New York coalition that's led by Eric Schmidt, who's one of the founders of Google, they're prioritizing the open access model. This is a very, very big deal. And let me explain why. Open access uses common infrastructure. So it's either a government entity or a private sector developer that lays fiber to every premises within a community and then leases out space on that fiber to multiple internet service providers. So to your home, you can select from multiple ISPs instead of just sort of one who has the franchise agreement. So it brings competition to the marketplace. It also works on pricing and levels pricing. And it also deals with the net neutrality issue. This is a model that is working extremely well in Utah. It's working extremely well in Washington State, and look for here. So there's precedent for something like this, actually. And it's called roads. The mail service, FedEx and UPS, they all use public roads to deliver a package to your home. They don't each pave their own roadway to get a package to you. Another precedent for this is airports. We have a port authority or another body who owns the airport, and they lease out gates to the various carriers. So look for this coming. And what's notable about this model and what's so important is that fiber is really expensive to deploy. You need patient capital. 30-year investment. That's why municipal revenue bonds work so well for this, and private sector developers who have patient capital. The tier one ISPs, their investors need a 3 to 5 year rate of return, which is why we're sort of stuck. We're sort of stuck in limbo with all of this. So this is a real opportunity for private sector ISPs to ride the fiber and not have to have the capital expense. Look for this model popping up everywhere in the US. It's extremely successful where it's working. And let's before we wrap up, let's talk a little bit about Westchester and where the opportunities are here right now. So we've got a pretty big digital equity problem in this county, one of the wealthiest counties in America. But there's a consortium of human services agencies, Allison Lake at Westchester Children's Association and Meg Kaufer at the STEM Alliance are sort of leading the conversation here. And we're really pleased to be working with them and supporting them on these efforts. Let's dive into these numbers. 51,000 households in Westchester, no internet subscription. So that's households, that's not individuals. The formula is multiplied by 3. So you're looking at 150,000 plus individuals in a county of 900,000 plus without any internet subscription. That's a very, very big deal for our economy. But, it's not just about doing the right thing in digital equity. Those without access to high-speed connectivity face downward mobility. First time in our nation's history, we're talking about downward mobility. The Federal Reserve put out a paper on this a couple of years ago, downward mobility without high-speed broadband. But there's an economic case to be made for counties. And this is really important. So this is a county, Medina County, Ohio, is a suburban county of Cleveland. We were doing some work for them just before the pandemic. They have a fiber network. They have about 300 of the businesses in the county attached to the fiber network. The other few thousand are not taking the fiber. The businesses that are attached to the fiber network equate to 1,000 new jobs, half of all total payroll created, half of the capital investment in the county, half of the square footage, and 75% of the jobs retained. And last slide here, Chattanooga, Tennessee built a fiber network, population of 180,000. Over 10 years, the economic impact, they just released a study 2 weeks ago, $2.7 billion. Look at all those jobs that were created. Look at all the investment. Look at all the new industries that popped up. Smart city research, because they can move the data. Smart city applications. VW built a new plant where they make the VW Atlas. That's where they're going to make their electric vehicles in the US. In Chattanooga, just because they had a fiber network and could move the data for the robotics and stuff background. And importantly, for government, there's $60 million that got put back into the coffers to fund public service. So I think the overlying message here is, to the business community and to our elected leaders here in Westchester is it's time to really start getting serious about this issue. There's many competing metro areas for economic development. We're moving very, very quickly towards fiber. And, we want to make sure that we are positioned well for the future.
Bob, thank you very much. That was a fantastic overview. And again, this is an issue that does need to continue to get more engagement from the business community. And there are more, as you explained, more opportunities for the business community to play a role in this. Shifting back now to the people on the ground, I'd like to introduce John Cooney. John is the Executive Director of the Construction Industry Council of Westchester and Hudson Valley, Inc. The CIC represents some 600 employers in the heavy highway contracting community, as well as hundreds of suppliers and builders throughout the Hudson Valley. Prior to his position with the CIC, John spent 40 years within the industry. He started at his family business, County Asphalt Inc., and eventually became its president. After the sale of his family's business, John went to work for CRH America Materials, serving as its New York's region president, where he was responsible for the management of 3 operating companies that covered downstate New York, Albany, and Rochester. John, obviously, you have been, living and breathing what's happened with your members, their families, as they're looking now to engage in some of what hopefully will be projects that will have long-term employment effects, but also important for the region. So thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Marcia, and thank you, the Business Council and the sponsors of this event. Yet, as Mike mentioned, our industry took a hit, but we were fortunate. We were able to work through the pandemic as an essential business. But, our industry is a late cycle business, meaning, we're the last in a downturn and many times the last out. It's our hope that this downturn will be a short one and that the administrations in Washington and in New York State will help that along. And there is most certainly, obviously, as we all know, a need for infrastructure investment. As mentioned, we represent 600 employers, and we're involved in all sorts of infrastructure investment: highways, bridges, airports, mass transit, utilities, power plants, and throughout the Hudson Valley region. As advocates for all things infrastructure, both public and private, the CIC partners with some 30 union locals of organized labor, and collectively speaks for more than 30,000 local residents who are employees of these enterprises and members of families throughout the 7 counties of the lower Hudson Valley. As the leading construction industry association in the Hudson Valley region, the CIC partners with labor, business associations like the Business Council of Westchester, environmental groups, charities, healthcare, education, local, state, and federal politicians to promote smart growth and infrastructure spend in our region. Examples of the type of partnering range from the new, just completed Mario Cuomo Bridge, where the CIC brought a multitude of different businesses, environmental, and political interests together to support building a once-in-a-generation project. We were a driving member and continue to be a driving member of the Clean Water Coalition that bought and continues to increase federal, state, and funding used by local municipalities to invest in new water and sewer infrastructure across New York State. We partner with the Audubon Society to bring much needed increased federal money to fund sewer plant improvements to clean up Long Island Sound. We partner with industry and labor on an annual basis to shine the light on the continuing need to fund the maintenance and repair of our existing infrastructure and larger improvement projects such as the Route 684 corridor and the Route 9A corridor in Briarcliff Manor. In combination with the Business Council of Westchester and other business groups and our local politicians, we continue to push for the award of a full gaming license for the MGM casino property in Yonkers. Simply, infrastructure spend keeps our region competitive, our communities healthy, and grows jobs. The jobs provided by the construction industry in Westchester County and beyond provide a true and predictable pathway to economic security and, yes, the American dream. The wages and benefits earned through the construction trades allow our employees and their families to live in our region, educate their children here, and donate their time to many local causes. The word trades is the very foundation that drives economic prosperity for our employees. Through pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs supported by labor and management, young people, as well as older people, can learn a trade that can support them for life. The Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics supported a 30-year study that tracked the economic outcomes of individuals that did not finish high school, those that finished high school, those that finished high school and pursued a trade, and those that completed a 4-year college. The results of the study found that those that finished high school, pursued and maintained a trade, had the same low incidence of unemployment through their careers as did the 4-year college individual. Further, the earnings gap between the trades individual and the 4-year college individual was not that large. In short, we all know that college is not for every child or every individual. Further, the earnings gap between the trades individual and the 4-year college individual was not that large. The construction trades are a great alternative. Many times these tradesmen and women leave their hourly jobs and go out on their own. The next time you have a plumber, carpenter, electrician, general contractor at your business or home providing a service, ask them how they got started. I bet I know the answer. I thank the Westchester Business Council, my fellow panelists, and our sponsors for allowing me the opportunity to discuss the important topic of infrastructure. Further, I hope we leave you, the audience, with a better understanding of how infrastructure investment betters our quality of life, makes our region competitive, attracts new investment and jobs, while supporting solid construction trade jobs. Thanks, John.
John, thank you, and thank you for the work that your members do on behalf of the county. And just to echo on 2 pieces that John said, obviously, again, one of our key legislative priorities will continue to be to urge the legislature to give Empire City, MGM, that full gaming license, because the potential future infrastructure work that can happen there is endless. And also on the green issue, one of the things that we've been talking about for quite a long time, sometimes we feel like we're Chicken Little, is that our energy landscape in Westchester County is going to change dramatically. And come April, when that last reactor closes at Indian Point, we are going to have to rely on the new sources of renewable energy. And we have always supported renewable energy, but the infrastructure to fill that reliability gap is huge, and we're not there yet. And so a lot of work is going to have to get done in a very short amount of time during these challenging fiscal times to get that done. And we will keep our members updated on this. I also just want to alert our people who are watching today, we are going to run a little over, and I think it's worth it, because this program is important and our speakers are doing a really fantastic job of giving us an overview. I saved the last speaker because he's probably the busiest person amongst all of us over these last few weeks with the weather and dealing with what is his responsibility, and that's Commissioner Hugh Grecian. He is let me just read you a little bit more about Commissioner Grecian's background. During his nearly 40 years career as a professional engineer in both the public and private sector, he has developed a thorough knowledge of Westchester's infrastructure. He was appointed commissioner of the county's Public Works and Transportation Department in February of 2017, overseeing the Westchester County Airport, the Beeline bus system, the facilities operation, the county fleet, and the road maintenance division. He is also responsible for moving the county's ambitious capital program forward, even with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. The commissioner's leadership has helped ensure the county continues to progress towards its infrastructure goals. And Commissioner, I'm sure I speak for you when I say thank goodness the snow didn't come as bad as they thought it would yesterday. But thank you for being with us, and thank you for all the work that you and the men and women of your department do.
Well, good morning, everyone. Am I on right now?
You're perfect.
I'm unmuted?
Yep.
Okay, great.
And you don't look like a cat.
Right. So, yeah, good morning, everyone. Listening to the previous speakers, it looks like the title for this presentation should be Get It Done. I mean, I've been here almost three years to the day, and one of the first initiatives the county executive had was the infrastructure program. There was a lot going on, but we knew we had to, move Westchester's economy forward. So we met. We had almost a 1.3 billion backlog here in Westchester County with capital projects. So the first thing we did, we assigned a working group, meeting with all the user departments, come up with new priorities in the 5-year capital program. And we also looked at trying to get the work out as quickly as possible. One of the major problems was that Westchester County was one of the only counties in New York that had a $10 million bond cap. So one of the first priorities with County Executive Latimer and the New York State Assembly was to get that cap removed. That was accomplished last spring. What that gave me the ability to do is combine road jobs, combine road jobs and bridge jobs. I have 2 movable bridges, and to do anything on a movable bridge costs you, $30 to $40 million. I have Fulton Avenue Bridge and also Glen Island Bridge, which comes into one of our park system on the Sound. So that was one of the major priorities that we had, is to move the system along. And also what we did is we looked to, the throughput end to get the counties, facilitate the letting of bids and to move all the bond acts and combine them between design and construction, we've never done in the past, was another recommendation that we followed through on. We've had cooperation from the Board of Legislators this year, and we've already approved over $10 million of bond acts for both design and construction. We used to separate those, and that used to slow down the system. So we're constantly looking for ways to improve. We have a lot of, like I said, a lot of backlog here in the county, a lot of needs. So far this year, the total bond acts actually that we approved is up to $95 million. So, we're using on-call engineering services for the first time. It's like a term contract. Other state agencies have used it. County never used it before. We have 4 on-call engineering firms that are used for both design and construction. We're also, there was a movement for increasing in the engineering staff within the Westchester County itself. A little bit slowed down with COVID, but we're still in the process. We're still hiring, engineers here to follow through on the projects. It's always a challenge. There's some mention. I work closely with John Cooney. Thank you for all his efforts getting construction moving. For the first 2 weeks of April, pretty much everything was shut down, and I had a number of conversations with the CIC, moving things forward in Westchester, coming up with the protocols on the job sites to streamline whatever we can. At first, it was a challenge. Some of my divisions, the engineering division, basically was shut down for a couple of weeks, and everybody was trying to figure out how to get people back in the buildings. I was charged with that for the county facilities, COVID protection. You couldn't even get masks back then, if everybody remembers. So it was kind of a scramble. My operations we do have the facilities, so I have an operations division that was full time. Not only were they in the buildings, they were in overtime, and to get everybody back into the facilities, COVID protected, proper protocols, and again, out in the construction, having, you're not meeting in the trailer with 12 people every morning now. You have separation. And again, the CIC was great with putting that all together and helping us move our county projects along. The county projects all have, as mentioned a little bit earlier, we have also PLAs on our major projects, and we, support, as John was mentioning, we support the unions, we support the apprenticeship programs. Without that, where's the talent to get all this done? I mean, that's really important to encourage anybody that to go into the trades. It's a well-paid, hard-working industry. You have to work hard. You don't get paid for nothing, but you can do very well in those industries, and there's a great need in Westchester for that. Every union I talk to, their apprenticeship programs, they're slowing down. So just in general, I encourage anybody to, if they want to go into, not everybody should go to college. We do really need to get things done. The bottom, boots on the ground is what we could really use here in Westchester. We're also, excuse me, I got a cheat sheet over here. Okay. We, again, on the operations side, we continue to work on COVID. We're also within the airport operations, the bus operations, all throughout, all our transportation facilities. It was critical to us during COVID. Take advantage of those times to, if you go up to the Westchester County Airport now, you'll see a lot of COVID protection procedures are already in place. We replaced all the carpet. Actually, the carpet every 6 feet apart is a different color when you're in line. We're working on the TSA, having with the second check-in facility to move people forward, social distancing. With our bus systems, we have not only, we used actually Lexan partitions to get those going. With the TWU, our union employees there for their protection. The county has onboarded people from the back of the bus free to protect the drivers, 3 seats back, every other seat to keep people going, the essential workers, get them to work up front. There was a lot of challenges there right up front, and we, with my staff, did an excellent job. Liberty Lines with, I can't say enough about them, moving the buses through all this. Airports at the county airport working with us. Very essential that we get that going. Very essential when the commercial planes come back, we move people through. Again, with the FBOs, they've come back quicker. They're starting to move, their businesses forward. Very essential for business in Westchester County to keep that airport functional and moving. Again, during those snowstorms we had, we basically weren't closed for more than 20 minutes at a time. So they sweep those runways. So very essential here in Westchester to get in as a major hub, third busiest airport in New York State. So lot of emphasis has gone to that. With the reduced traffic, we also took advantage of some COVID, both on the roads and bridges. We had maintenance and protection plans that basically were changed midstream because we didn't have a rush hour anymore. So we were able to move a lot of projects on. Typically, the best example would be the Bronx River Parkway going through. It's a limited access highway through a park here in Westchester County, where it moving a lot of commuter traffic. We had a lot of projects. We had 3 bridges, 2 roads, and we were able to complete those projects ahead of time. So, not that there's any benefits, but any opportunity we could have to move things forward, we did. Had a lot of cooperations with the contractors. The main runway at the county airport was also replaced during this time. There was 6,000 tons a day of asphalt put out there, and there was 6 joints in the whole main runway. There normally would have been 100 joints, and it would have took 3 times as long. So again, once we're ready to open up and move things along, we've gotten a lot of things done during COVID, and again the county executive it was just essential to moving business forward here in Westchester. One more, just hard to get here. All right. So the other things that we worked on too during COVID was one of our major initiatives is Playland Amusement Park. We had over $42 million worth of work let here in the last couple of months. We're redoing most of the boardwalk area. We're doing activity pools. We wanted to turn that into a full-time. Right now it's just run from May to September, a full-time facility. Having access to, it's very popular, having access to the water. We're redoing the administration building, and we'll probably have a limited opening on Playland this year. So we'll also be continuing to do work. It's an historic park. We're finishing up the carousel and the derby racer and all the historic aspects of it right now. We'll be ready to open, probably the Kiddieland sometime early in the spring. And so we're looking forward to, again, that's another revenue generator. It's another attraction here. We tried to, again, anything that was during our parks to move things forward. We've been also working with the golf courses. They had one of the busiest years they ever had last year, and we continue to improve those. So, and just back on the mentioned earlier, green initiatives. We're working with the Power Authority of New York on 8 active projects right now, mostly building construction. We're working on solar, $5 million worth of projects there. Putting solar at the county Croton Park. We're putting solar on the top of our operations buildings for the county bus lines in Valhalla and Yonkers. And anytime we can have efficiency aspects, working with DASNY, working with the Power Authority on our projects, we always look for those opportunities. And we're all, at the county airport, we're also finishing up a water line study where we're going to have a loop for more access to water at the county airport. We have a stormwater program we're always looking to improve the water quality. On one side of the airport, we have the New York City reservoir system. And then on the other side, we have Blind Brook, which goes down into the Sound. So again, we've moved things forward. We streamlined things here in Westchester County. And again, we live this every day. It's a kind of frankly, a challenging but an exciting time for this department. And they've really stepped up. And again, I'd like to also still thank John Cooney for all his work and cooperation in the beginning to move things forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, the work that you and the men and women in your department do on a daily basis, we all owe a debt of gratitude to. And you and I participated in the Westchester County Airport Advisory Council, and I know the runway repairs was a huge thing that had to get done. And the airport is such an important economic development tool. So kudos to you and the county executive for getting those repairs done during these challenging times. We have just a few minutes left. I have questions that have come in that I really want to ask at least our panelists one question each. So I'm going to ask them to be mindful with their answers, but in time-wise, but there's some really top-notch questions. And I'm going to stick with you for a second on the first question, because we have a lot of members from the Business Council of Westchester who have asked the same questions. They come from different industries. And obviously, when we talk about infrastructure, other related businesses can be involved in those projects. So can you give us a brief understanding of how companies can participate in the county's infrastructure program?
Yes, we hire both as I mentioned before, consulting engineers and the contract through Public Works. So there's a county website you can go on, and you go to, just scroll through Public Works. There's a number. We have our own publication. It's called Westworks. We're also on BidNet for consulting services, where it's a process where it's a standard form at 254. You can call this office. It's 995-2546. There's links on Westworks. That's our weekly publication that will help you with that. It's a professional service. We have a professional selection board, and that process is professionals that shortlist. They match the consultant's expertise with the job, and we take that short list and then move forward with those. So that way it's a blend. We're always looking for new talent, new contractors. Again, we're also on BidNet with New York State. So between those three things, you'll always find out what we're doing. Feel free to contact this office, and again, the county website will bring you, if you go on just westchestergov.com into Public Works, you'll find those links.
That's great, and that's very important. So thank you. And for our members who, for any reason, didn't catch all that information, if you have questions or want to make that connections, please contact the Business Council of Westchester, and we'll make sure you get to the right areas that Hugh just described. Ed Mortimer, it was interesting. Over the weekend, I read an article regarding Secretary Buttigieg, who's in his first few days in his new position, and he said something that I think is very positive, but it also raised obviously some issues of challenges. He said, quote, "I envision our department playing a central role in the vital national project of building America's economy and infrastructure back better." He said, "We'll break new ground in ensuring that our economy recovers and rebuilds, in rising to the climate challenge, and in making sure transportation is an engine of equity for this country." A bold statement in these challenging times. You gave in your presentation an overview about what needs to happen. What are just some of the key challenges, though, that the chamber really is going to be driving the Washington and to make sure it gets done in 2021?
Absolutely, John. So I think a couple points is, one, we want to have a sustainable funding source. I think all of our panelists will tell you that when there's predictability of federal investment in infrastructure, they can do their job much more effectively. And so getting that type of certainty is really going to be critical as the federal government moves forward. And again, we want to modernize this infrastructure to build it to handle climate issues that are different than when many of it was built 50 to 100 years ago. So we're open to bringing business, innovation, and technology to that solution. And we also built infrastructure, again, that back in the 50s and 60s, it did disadvantage certain communities. And we do want to make sure that every American can benefit from modern infrastructure. So, while we may not agree on all the the details, I think the overall goals is something that we can stand with the new secretary on, is building modern infrastructure, making sure that it's interconnected, making sure that we make sure every American benefits from it, and that we're able to be successful, not just in the domestic economy, but a global economy. So again, I think there's a lot of things we can come together on. Details are going to be how to pay for it. As you mentioned earlier, we support adjusting the federal fuel tax and then kind of moving to a vehicle mile traveled. That's about a 10-year process, but we need to start it now. So those are kind of going to be the big issues. But again, I think these are bridgeable differences that we can come together on. If we all stand by our lawmakers and say, now's the time, we're going to stand by you to come up with some bipartisan solutions.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate also, Ed, that you put in the chat room, and I hope people will go to that, that Ed has put in the website for www.letsrebuildamerica.com in a way to get more involved in this. So Ed, thank you very much for that. Mike Emlendorff, you and I sit on different statewide coalitions together. We see legislation that comes out from the legislature. As a former assemblyman, I get the fact that sometimes you write a piece of legislation thinking you're doing the right thing, but really don't have a clue of what the long-term ramifications can be to that legislation. What are some of the challenges that you think we need to continue to be laser focused on with our legislature to not do, so that we can move forward with many of the objectives and projects that we've heard about this morning?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, John, these days it often seems like it's more about not doing something than doing something in Albany, right? There's, I think, as you point out, a lot of well-intentioned lawmakers who are pushing various ideas that may be real problematic, certainly for our industry, but generally for the business community. We worked very closely, last year with the Business Council, really the last couple of years, trying to stop the proposal to expand prevailing wage to private construction activity. That continues to be a real concern. The legislature did it last year in the budget, which was kind of unconscionable, right, in the economic uncertainty that we were facing. When we support prevailing wage for public work, that's where it belongs, right? But when you attach it to a project that's being incented by an economic development program, because the theory is, of course, it wouldn't happen if you didn't have an incentive and you increase the cost of the project, it's just completely illogical. At this point, that is on the books. It is supposed to take effect at the end of 2021, but there is an opportunity to tap the brakes on it for a year based on economic conditions. And we're certainly pushing the administration to do that. They're supposed to impanel a public subsidy wage board by April 1st. We hope that they will do that and that they will look at the economic realities of the state not go there, at least not in the next year, because we need economic activity, we need job creation, we need recovery in every community in the state, and that's not going to help. So there's if you want to talk about things the legislature shouldn't do, we're going to need more time because there's a lot of troubling ideas, in Albany. And, as you know, John, it's harder now, right? Because we're not in the building. There's a lot you pick up from walking around and talking to lawmakers and talking to other advocates and sort of picking up chatter about this, that, or the other thing. That's missing. And so it's made the job, not just the business community, but really of all advocates, I think, more difficult. So we're doing a lot of this sort of Zooming and texting with people and trying to keep informed. But, again, I just want to say we really value the partnership with the Business Council and your team. And, our friendship, John, goes way back. The business community is working really well together across the state. John Cooney and I talk all the time. Most of his members are our members, so we're all hard at work trying to make things better here, but there's a lot of headwinds economically and policy wise that make that challenging.
Mike, again, thank you. And again, it's a pleasure to be partners with you in so many projects. Bob Knight, during your presentation and the fact that you're looking at things all, nationally on the broadband issue, is there one thing that you're seeing that's interesting that outside of the county that we really should focus on right now?
Yes, I think that the level of innovation that has occurred in markets where they have ubiquitous fiber to the premises deployments is remarkable. The types of new businesses that have come in, things that we haven't even thought of, and it's happening in suburban markets. It's happening in places that we wouldn't even imagine. It's kind of mind blowing, the number of jobs that are created, the amount of capital investment, and it's funny, in rural areas we're not really a rural county, but in like rural areas, when you see fiber to the farm hit and what's being done in precision agriculture, it's like mind blowing how the farmers they're so sophisticated, right? And they have autonomous tractors and they're they're taking their crops and they're shipping them overseas to China. And everything is so data driven. And it's exciting to see the country moving forward, and really hope to see Westchester jumping forward. I'm so sorry, I have to jump to another meeting I'm a little late for, so I'm going to leave you
No
guys.
worries. And thank you for joining us, and thank you for your support on this. John Cooney, I'm going to close it out with you, because you touched on something that, again, has been one of the priorities for the Business Council of Westchester. And now more than ever do we have to be, again, laser focused on that, and that's workforce development. Can you just, as we wrap up today's program, share with us just some examples of how the construction industry really can be, and again, I use this word, but I don't use it lightly, an incubator for workforce development?
Thanks, John. Yeah, and it's sort of broad reaching. Obviously, the subject infrastructure investment, we're doing that to try to differentiate our county from others and attract jobs that are coming here. And then our labor force trails that investment. And I can't enforce enough that the labor force in Westchester County, but across the state of New York, this is a labor force. These are real wages with benefits. So while we're investing in our infrastructure, we are trailing along very good jobs for people. But, getting back to sort of workforce development, some of the investments we make, and I'd point out one that, people don't really look at, but I look like it's an investment. The incentives that I think there are 6 IDAs in Westchester County. I may be off by one, and if I am, I apologize, but they incent projects that drive construction jobs, hopefully bring permanent jobs with them. The one other part of this that is really workforce development is workforce housing, and creating that, and that comes with affordable housing that becomes part of these new projects. I continue to encourage the IDAs that are incenting the residential projects to require a higher percentage of workforce housing. We know we need it. That's how we're going to grow. That's another form of workforce development that is out there. We need to attract people so that the jobs, we can feed the jobs locally. But our people are trained, they're safety trained, they go through apprenticeship programs. As I said in the beginning, they are a trade, but it's a trade for life. And the spend that we make, both private and public, drives that employment level. And it is a good, healthy employment sector.
Well, thank you very much. Again, we want to thank John Cooney, Mike Emlendorff, Hugh Grecian, Bob Knight, and Ed Mortimer for joining us today. We want to especially thank our presenting sponsor, PCSB Bank, and our contributing sponsors, Harrison Edwards and the Robert Martin Company. On behalf of Marcia Gordon, our leader at the Business Council of Westchester, and Heidi Davidson, our board chair, we hope that you have enjoyed this first of 4 sessions that we'll be doing on the state of Westchester's economy. This session will be on our website, on our Business Resource Center by the end of the day today. So if you have not been able to or came in late or want to share this with your colleagues, please feel free to do so. And again, we hope you'll join us on March 10th for our second series, which will be on healthcare. And then on March 10th, March 10th will be the next one, and then our final 3 moving forward. So again, thank you very much for being here this morning. Thank you again to our panel. Everyone remain safe, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.